Okay. In Matthew 5:19, Jesus said, "Do and teach God's law." This is God's law number 30, crime witnesses. Hello, everybody. I'm Jim McCotter. Welcome. Here's God's law number 30 from God's law book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 15 through 21. You must not convict anyone of a crime on the testimony of only one witness. The facts of the case must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If a malicious witness comes forward and accuses someone of a crime, then both the accuser and the accused must appear before the Lord by coming to the judges in office at the time. The judges must investigate the case thoroughly. If the accuser has brought false charges, you must impose on the accuser the sentence he intended for the other person. In this way, you will purge such evil from among you. Then the rest of the people will hear about it and be afraid to do such an evil thing. You must show no pity for the guilty. Your rule should be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. End quote. The first point in this law of God is straightforward. Verse 15. You must not convict anyone by only one witness, but only by 2 or 3 witnesses. Here, as in other places in God's law, a witness must be credible. But one place where man's unbiblical justice breaks down today is requiring more than simply 2 or 3 credible witnesses to conclude a trial and declare the judgment. Many murders are witnessed live by many witnesses and even seen on TV by millions. Yet they'll still spend weeks, months, and even years trying many cases. What kind of justice is that? It not only costs millions of dollars, but extends the agony to everyone, not least of whom the victims. Moreover, God says in Ecclesiastes 8:11, quote, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men among them are given fully to do evil, end quote. To require more than 2 or 3 witnesses to have a verdict is injustice. To not have capital punishment for every murderer is injustice. To keep a murderer on death row for years or even days is injustice. Follow God's law. Psalms 19 verse 7 says, the law of the Lord is perfect. False witnesses. If God's law is fully carried out, it virtually eliminates false witnesses. The text at this point gives instruction in the event there is only one witness or only one accuser. Quote, verse 16, if a malicious witness comes forward and accuses someone of a crime, then both the accuser and accused must appear before the Lord by coming to the judges in office at that time. End quote. We saw in earlier places in God's law the requirement for all judges to be God-fearing men, wise, just, etc. Thus, coming before a judge is as appearing as if you're appearing before the Lord and His law. Judges represent the Lord with their judgments and thus must judge with no other law than the Lord's just law. This is the first thing judges must do. Verse 18, quote, the judges must investigate the case thoroughly, end quote. This verse speaks for itself, and God tells the judges exactly what to do if there is a false accuser. End quote, or quote, verse 18 and 19, 20 and 21 says, if the accuser has brought false charges, you must impose on the accuser the sentence he intended for the other person. In this way you will purge such evil from among you. Then the rest of the people will hear about it, be afraid to do such things themselves. You must show no pity for the guilty. Your rule should be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, end quote. This law is revolutionary. At the time it was given to the nation of Israel and for all nations to follow, there were no laws, nor ever had been in the world, that were so just. This was true for at least 2 major reasons. First, God's law applied to all people with no respecter of persons, to the kings, to the wealthy, to the most powerful, or to the lowest, to the poorest, to every citizen, and to every foreigner. The same law for all. Second, as we see in these verses, it is so perfectly just. The verse says, quote, if the accuser has brought false charges, you must impose on the accuser the sentence he intended for the other person, end quote. This is perfect justice. And if potential false accusers know the judges are always going to carry out God's law, it will virtually eliminate false accusers and also frivolous lawsuits. Mahatma Gandhi has been credited with saying, quote, "An eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind," end quote. That sounds pretty cool, but is logically quite stupid. He may have said that when he was sitting around spinning his own clothes. But if there is no civil justice and punishment for evildoers, there will not be less evildoers, but more. Remember when California reclassified the crime of theft as no longer a felony if you stole less than $950? Mass shoplifting exploded. But Gandhi proclaimed having so-called, quote, compassion, end quote, for wrongdoers. Compassion is good for the church and Christians to have, but this is not God's purpose for his civil authorities. God has his civil servants for justice. Without justice, there's no compassion for victims, and crime multiplies. Some say God's law came from Hammurabi in the law code because they say Hammurabi was before Moses. Well, do you know what Hammurabi's law says? It favored wealthy who only had to pay a fine if guilty. It favored men over women. Adultery was death for women, but not men. It favored social order over individual rights. A guilty person may only have to jump into the Euphrates River. It had many grotesque punishments, such as removing the guilty party's tongue or breasts. In Law 218, it stated, quote, "If a surgeon has operated with a bronze lancet on a free man for a serious injury and has caused his death, his hands shall be cut off," end quote. There were three main classes in Babylonian society, upper, middle, and lower, and the code punished the guilty party based on their class. Death penalty for theft. Death penalty for 25 different other crimes other than death, but not for murder. Hammurabi's law code was nothing like God's just and moral law. Psalms 19:17. Psalms 19:7 says, "The law of the Lord is perfect."